Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma's Sheila, and I have this week's story for you. But before I tell you about that, a little while ago, I had been looking out the front window of my house, and the sun was shining and it was warm outside. Now, I have a big porch on the front of my house, and out there is a big swing, big enough for 2 people. And if you were little, 3. Well, sometimes I like to go out and sit in the sunshine on that porch swing. Well, today was one of those days. But I went over and I looked down behind the sofa to look for something special. Well, down the street from us, there is an abandoned house. I'm sure someday the city's going to get around to tearing it down. But right now, I say it's abandoned. And it truly is. It's abandoned of people. But it's full of kitty cats. And those cats, I guess you would call them wild cats or feral cats. They don't hurt anybody. They just live there, and they're frightened of people most of the time. But this afternoon, when I looked out that front window, I could see the swing over here in the sunshine. And when I looked right down, right there is a little round table with 2 chairs with little cushions on them that sit out there on my porch. And on top of one of them is the fluffiest, biggest cat I've ever seen. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, but it's all curled up in a ball with its feet underneath of it and its little head laying down and its tail wrapped around its side. And it's sound asleep on one of those little cushions on top of that chair. Well, boys and girls, do you think I opened my door and went rushing right out? No. I think that kitty needs a nap, and I don't want to wake him up. So I'm going to be kind to him and let him continue to sleep on my porch. Well, now it's time for our story. Our story is called Mopsey's Mistake. Mopsey, that's an odd name. Well, Mopsey was 4, and she was standing in her living room, and there was a knock at the door, and the door came flying open, and there was Uncle Jack. Now, Uncle Jack had been out in the cold weather outside, and he had on a great big overcoat. And Mopsey, she looked at him and she thought, he looks just like a big bear. Well, Uncle Jack, he looked down at Mopsey, and he reached down and he put his arms around her, and he gave her the biggest hug ever, and she giggled. Well, Uncle Jack liked to come, and he liked to bring Mopsey, whose real name is Loie. He liked to bring her and her little sister. Do you know what Uncle Jack called little sister? Little sister's nickname was Popsy. So there was Mopsey and there was Popsy. Well, Uncle Jack, he looked around and he said, "Where's Popsy?" And Loie, she looked at Uncle Jack and said, hers in bed. Well, Uncle Jack said, "That's too bad." And in the pocket of that big coat, he stuck his hand, and he started rustling around. Oh my, such a noise of paper and foil and things in this pocket. And Mopsey stood there and she looked intently at Uncle Jack. Uncle Jack, pretty soon, he pulled his hand out. And do you know what was in his hand? 2 long red and white sugar sticks. 2 of them. Not just 1, but 2. And Mopsey looked at him and she grinned. She loved sugar sticks. And Uncle Jack, whenever he came, he bought a treat for each of the little girls. Well, those 2 red and white sugar sticks, he looked around and he looked at Mopsey. And he said, These are for you. And he held them out, and Mopsey took them eagerly. She wanted to eat those sugar sticks. And she looked at them, though. And her mind was thinking. And Mama said, "Mopsey, aren't you going to save one for Popsy, little Grace?" Mopsey looked more intently at those sugar sticks. She wanted them both. And then she looked up at Mama, and Mama was looking at her like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And Mopsey thought, I really want them both. So she turned to Mama and she said, "I don't think sugar sticks are good for little girls." And then she said, "Besides, I want both of them." Well, Mama didn't say anything right then. And Mopsey, or Loki, she started eating them, sucking on the end of them, chewing on them, eating. Well, pretty soon she'd eaten the whole first one. And she looked at that other one. I think that her conscience was bothering her, saying, "Shouldn't you share with little sister?" But instead of listening to that little voice, she listened to the other voice that said, "But Uncle Jack gave them to you. You can eat both of them." And she went. She picked it up, and she ate it as fast as she could, till it was all gone. And just then, there was a little cry from the bedroom. "Mommy!" And Uncle Jack went, "It's Popsy. She must be awake. Hi, Popsy." Well, Mother rushed in, and she gathered little Popsy up. And, little tiny 2-year-olds and little babies have the sweetest little faces when they wake up. Their cheeks are all rosy, and you can see their little dimples. And generally, if you pick them up and hold them, they smile at you. Well, that's exactly what Popsy did. She smiled at Mommy, and then she saw Uncle Jack, and she got all excited. And Mommy set her down. And she went over to Uncle Jack, and she shyly gave him a little hug. And Uncle, he gave her a hug back. Then Seeing the look on little Mopsey's face, he stuck his hand back inside of that pocket and he started rustling around, rustling the paper and the foil that was in there. And pretty soon out came his hand with not one but 2 red and white sugar sticks in it. And he held them out to Mopsey. Mopsey took one in each hand, and she looked at them. You know, one was longer than the other one. She looked at this one. No, this one was longer, and this one was shorter. And she turned around to Mopsey, and she took the longest one in her hand and she stuck it out to Big Sister Mopsey. And she said, "Dis for you, and dis for me." She was holding out the biggest one for her big sister. And Mopsey, her face, she started to get all red in her face, and she didn't know what to do. She looked at little Mopsey sticking that out toward her. She didn't know what to do. Finally, Mama said, "Take it, Loie. Take it." So Loie reached out and she took it. Mopsey, joyfully running about, eating and sucking on her sugar stick. But you know, Mopsey didn't feel like eating that other sugar stick. And she wasn't happy. She knew that what she should have done was shared. Well, Mother didn't say anything, and neither did Uncle Jack. But a little while later, Mama heard Loie going over to little baby Grace, or Mopsey, and she said, "Gracie, I'm never, ever, 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 ever gonna be greedy again. I'm always going to share with you, Mopsey. I'm sorry." And I believe that that is exactly what she did. Thank you, boys and girls, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.